Now we're going to focus on adding and subtracting integers. Now the adding part is pretty easy, but when we get to the subtracting of integers, whether they are positive and negative or negative and negative, that's where it gets a little confusing. So I'm going to try and make it as simple as possible, give some diagrams and some visuals for you. But let's take a look at the terms and the definitions so we can fully understand some of the rules of how we're going to add and subtract integers. So adding two negative integers is pretty much the same thing as adding two positive integers, except the answer of adding two negative ones will be negative. So if I have 2 dots plus 6, that's going to give me 8. Well, if I'm adding 2 negative dots plus 6 negative dots, that's going to give me 8 negative dots, so negative 8. So basically, 2 plus 6 is 8. Negative 2 plus negative 6 will be negative 8. So I can actually look at it in a very basic diagram, maybe where I'm counting the number of circles or dots or items, or I can actually do this on a number line. So if you can visualize this on a number line, you can actually, this may help you. Maybe you're that type of visual person where visualizing it on a number line in your head. We have negative 2 plus negative 6. I have 6 more going to the negatives. That's going to be negative 8. Okay, and you can also see here what we did. We have a negative 2 plus a negative 6. And the negative 6 is in parentheses. Here's an example. Let's add 4 plus 2 on the number line. 4, we're moving from 0. And then I add 2 more, that's going to be 6. So in the same way, let's do that with a negative numbers. So if we have negative 2 plus 3 more negatives, plus negative 3 on the number line, we have negative 2, I'm going to go 3 more negatives. That's going to give me negative 5. Okay, negative 5. So this is adding two negative numbers. So minus 2 plus, parentheses, negative 3. Now when adding integers with similar or the same signs, so like signs means the same sign, so both of them are negative or both of them are positive. First thing that we're going to do in these steps, I'm going to give each negative number an absolute value. That means I'm going to take that negative number, even though there is no absolute value sign there, I'm going to add the absolute value sign around it. Then I'm going to take the absolute value and basically add it. When I say the word add-ins, add the absolute value of each of the add-ins. Add-ins just means what digits am I adding. So if I have 2 plus 3 plus 4, 2, 3, and 4 are my add-ins. Those are the things that are being added. Okay, we learned this at the beginning of the year. So what I'm going to do is add the absolute value of each of the add-ins. So if I have negative 3 absolute value, negative 2 absolute value, if I have a plus sign between those, I'm going to add those together. The negative turns to positive, negative turns to positive in the absolute value signs, then I just add them together. Then number 3, I'm going to give the sum, the sign of the original add-in. So before I turned it into an absolute value, I'm going to give the sum, the total, the sign. So if the original add-ins had negatives, then I'm going to give it a negative. So I did a lot of talking here. Let's try and break this down so it makes sense. Okay, here's an example. I'm going to add negative 2 plus negative 1 plus negative 3. So for each number that is negative, let's put it into an absolute value sign. So 2, so negative 2 will have an absolute value sign around it. Negative 1 will have an absolute value sign around it. Negative 3 will have an absolute value sign around it. So that means I'm going to turn the negative 2 to a 2. I'm going to turn the negative 1 to a 1. I'm going to turn the negative 3 to a 3. I gave each negative number an absolute values. Place the absolute value around the negative 2, the negative 1, and the negative 3. So that turns it to 2 plus 1 plus 3. I add those together. That gives me 6. But remember, I'm not done yet. I want to go ahead. Now I'm on step 3. I want to go ahead and I want to give the sum, which is 6, the sign of the original addends. Now remember, I'm adding integers with the same sign. So the same signs are all going to be positive or all going to be negative. Because the same sign is negative, I turn that 6 into a negative 6. The negative 2 plus the negative 1 plus the negative 3 is a negative 6. So I can go ahead and do this to help me if I have too many numbers or I have the large numbers and I can't visualize a number line. Suppose you want to add 1 and negative 1. You can visualize this on a number line. You move 1 over, negative 1 moves back, it's 0. You can also look at it as 1 minus 1. Now let's add integers with unlike signs. I'm going to use, number 1, I'm going to use the absolute value if the number is a negative. So any negative number I'm going to place in the absolute value, just like I did with the like sign. Here I'm going to subtract the absolute value of the addends. So I'm going to, anything that I'm going to be adding, I'm going to subtract the absolute value, smaller from the larger. And then here's a key, I'm going to give the sum the sign. So the total will get the sign of the addend. Here it is, that has the larger absolute value. So if whatever one has the larger value, that will be the sign I'm going to give the total. So let's look at this one. Okay, let's add 5 plus negative 2. So let's put the negative 2 in absolute value. So 5 minus negative 2 in absolute value, so that would be 5 minus 2. So 5 minus 2 is 3. Okay, what was the largest value? 5. So 5 is positive. So 3 would not turn into a negative, it would stay a positive. Okay, let's try this again. Add negative 7 and 7. Okay, let's put the negative 7 as a absolute value. Okay, let's do example number 2. Let's add negative 7 and 7. We're going to put both of those in absolute values. Okay, negative 7 becomes 7. 7 minus 7 is 0. 0 does not get a positive or negative, so there's no change there. So that's real easy. Okay, let's add negative 5 plus 2. Negative 5 plus 2, let's put them both in absolute value. We know the negative 5 is the only one that will change, and that will turn 5 minus 2. 5 minus 2 is going to be 3. Remember, I'm not done yet. Let's double check. Which one was the largest value? Negative 5. Or in absolute value, it would be the 5, right? So the 5 is the larger value, and that came from the negative 5. So that will actually become not a 3, but a negative 3. So I have to use all 3 steps here. So this third step is very important. I have to look at which one had, okay, the larger absolute value. Let's go ahead and try these 4 practice problems. Go ahead, pause it, and then let's check our answers. Let's look at practice 1. We're finding the sum of negative 5 and 3. So negative 5 plus 3. We can do it in a visual perspective. If I have negative 5 dots and I have 3 positive dots, I can actually take away those 3 dots. So there will be just 2 left. Okay, here's practice number 2. I went ahead and put all of these in absolute value. So I'm left with 2 plus 7 plus 5 plus 11. That's 25. But then the original sign was a negative, so that's going to be negative 25. Now here I can use a number line. I'm going to move that number from 0, negative 6 places, and then I can move it 4 places back, and that's 2. And I did the same thing here with the number line. Okay, 3 places back to negative 3, and then 9 forward, that would be 6. So there are 3 different ways here that I'm showing you that you can actually utilize some different help tools to help you figure out and add like and unlike numbers. Now I can also go ahead and instead of using the number line, just like practice number 2, I can use the absolute value. So we have negative 3, I'll put that in the absolute value, plus 9. So the negative 3 turns into a 3, so 3 plus 9 is 6. But I'm not done yet. I have to just double check. What was the greatest value? What number? Was it the negative 3 or the 9? If it was the negative 3, then 6 should be a negative. But it wasn't. 3 was not the biggest number. 9 is the biggest number. So remember, if I'm adding two unlike integers, two unlike numbers, I'm going to go ahead and choose the biggest number, and that will be the sign I'm going to focus on. So it's going to be 6 because 9 is a positive. Okay, now we're going to focus on subtracting integers. We just focus on adding integers with same and different signs, positive or negative. But here we're going to focus on when we subtract an integer, we need to remember that subtracting an integer gives the same result as adding an integer, but it's going to be an opposite. Here's an example. We have a and b. A minus b is the same as a plus minus b. Okay, let's look at the examples. Change them. I'm not asking to solve them, but let's change them. Negative 3 minus negative 4. So what I can do is put the negative 4 in parentheses. So I will have negative 3 plus negative 4. So when I subtract integers, it's going to be the same as adding, okay, the opposite. So 8 minus negative 5, we go ahead and make it the opposite. That will be 8 plus 5. So a subtraction problem can change to an addition problem. The rules for adding those integers are then applied. So if I have two negative numbers like letter B, 8 minus parentheses negative 5, I can go ahead and turn those two positive. Then now that means I have to follow the rules of adding integers. Let's look at example 2. Now let's try and solve it. Let's write it out. Let's change it and solve it. Negative 7 minus 4. I can do negative 7 plus minus 4. Okay, now I'm going to follow the rules of adding integers. Negative 7 plus minus 4, same sign. I can turn these into absolute value. So 7 plus 4 is 11, but the sign was negative, so that would be negative 11. Okay, we have negative 9 minus negative 13. That will be negative plus 13. Negative 9 plus 13 equals 4. Do C, 4 minus 16, 4 plus negative 16, that would give me negative 12. And then D, 11 plus 3 is 14.